up, guys? So glad that you're joining us. And this week we are starting a brand new series called Wanderers. And so we finally finished the book of Genesis, and now we're moving on to the book called Exodus, the second book in the Bible. And Exodus actually means departure. And so when you think about departure, where do you hear the word departure? It makes me think of maybe if I was going on a flight. Whenever you go to the airport, there's arrivals and departures. And departure is where you go to leave, to go somewhere. But arrival is when you get to your destination. And so the book of Exodus is about the Israelites departing from Egypt and going to the promised land. And so today we're going to be talking about a guy named Moses who had a great call in his life and ended up being the one who led the Israelites out of Egypt. But just like every story, you have to start at the very beginning of their story. And so where we pick up is there was a guy named Moses. And Moses was born at a time where the Israelites, they were growing and growing and growing. And it made the people, the Egyptian people and the pharaohs really, really nervous and kind of terrified about what was going to happen. So they made them all slaves. And not just that, but then they said, you have to kill like newborns and whatnot. And so, but Moses was born to a mom. And so she tried to hide him the best she could. And then she ended up putting him in a basket and floating him down the Nile River. Now, Pharaoh's daughter was bathing in the river further down. And so Moses is floating. And then could you imagine if you were bathing in a river or wherever, and then you hear this, you see this basket and you hear this crying maybe of a baby. And so she's like, ah! Like, what is that? And so she goes and gets it, and then she finds out that it was a baby. And so she ends up, by this crazy act of God, she ends up giving the baby back to the mom, but she doesn't know it's a mom. And the mom raises the baby, and then when it gets to a certain age, she gives it back to Pharaoh's daughter to raise it. And so Pharaoh grew up in the palace pretty much. And so he grows up in, like, if you grew up in the palace, like under the king, you were well educated, you were treated really great, you got all the training you needed to become a great leader. And so growing up, they probably thought Moses was going to be a great leader. Until, though, Moses gets ahead of what God was going to do. God wanted to lead the Israelites out of Egypt and protect them. But Moses gets ahead of God. And so on his own idea, he sees this Israelite and this Egyptian man fighting. And so he ends up going and killing the Egyptian man. And then he goes back, and then he knows that Pharaoh's going to hear about it, so he flees. But right before that, he goes back, and the Israelites are scared of him. They said, whoa, what are you going to do? Are you going to kill us too? And so he flees, and so he goes to another land. And so it says that years pass, and the king of Egypt, he dies. But the Israelites continue to just be, the word it uses is groan, which was be very upset because they had this burden of slavery, that they were working for the Egyptians, and that they knew that God had promised them to become a nation, to be in the promised land. And so God was going to choose one of the Israelites, to lead them out of Egypt. Now, Moses, if you were to pick a leader to lead an entire nation, what kind of characteristics would you like in that leader? Would you want them to be courageous or nervous? Brave or timid? Would you want them to be good at speech or not good at speech? What were the things that you would want in a good leader? Now, if I was picking a leader, I would want some of those things: courage, bravery, maybe really good at talking, someone who wanted peace, or whatever those things are. Well, God, he knows and who we are. He created us, and so he calls us to great things. And one of the great things that God called Moses to was to lead the people. And so if you were thinking, how would you tell someone to be a leader and to lead people out, lead an entire nation? Maybe it would be like a secret agent. Like maybe they get their phone or TV changes. It's like, hello, secret agent, I have a message for you. This message will self-destruct in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Maybe something like that. Well, God speaks to Moses through a bush. And so Moses, he was a shepherd. Whenever he fled, he went to a foreign land, and he was a shepherd. So he took care of a flock, and he's wandering around with his flock, and he comes to the bottom of Mount Sinai, and there's a bush, and he sees it, but he sees something very different. It is on fire, but it's not burning up. If you've ever seen a fire or campfire before, you know that if you put wood on it, it burns up and it like goes away. It turns into ash. But this bush was on fire, but it wasn't burning up. So he's like, that's weird. I want to go get a closer look. And it says that actually that God was the the fire in the bush. And so he gets up to it and he's like, what is this? And he looks, and this is what it says in Exodus 3, 1-2. One day Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led a flock far into the wilderness and came to Sinai, the mountain of God. There was an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of the bush. Moses stared in amazement. Though the bush was engulfed in flames, it did not burn up. And so picture this. You're going to this bush. You're like, I want to go check that out. And you start to get closer and closer and closer. And then you hear this voice from inside the bush say, Moses, Moses, or says your name. My name's Kyler. Kyler. Think about your own name. What would you do? If it was me, I'd probably be like, what? Maybe you'd be like, and run away. But Moses, it says, this is what he says in Exodus 3, verse 4b. It says, here I am. Here I am. He didn't run away. He just says, here I am. And so what is our response when God calls us? Has God ever spoken to us? And what was our response? Was it like, oh, no, like, don't talk to me? Or was it like, yes, God, what are you trying to tell me? What is our response? And so God tells Moses that he has a great mission for him to go and lead the Israelites out of Egypt. But Moses, remember, he tried to do it in his own power last time. And he killed an Egyptian man. And so he's like, no way, who am I supposed to say had sent me? And he says, tell them it is me. It is I. I'm the one who's going to send you. And he's like, well, are you sure me? And he's like, yes, I'll be with you. And so he ends up going and deciding that this is what he's going to do. But he has uncertainties. He has questions. And so he even says, what if they don't believe me? What if I talk to them and they don't listen to me? It says it in Genesis 4:1. Moses protested, what if they won't believe me or listen to me? What if they say the Lord never appeared to you? And then God gives him 3 signs. So he had a staff that he would walk with. And he says, put the staff on the ground and it'll turn into a serpent, into a snake. And then he says, take your hand. And a cloak would have a hood on it. He says, take your hand, put it inside your cloak and pull your hand out. And it was covered in disease. It was pale white. And he says, now do it again. And he does it again and he comes out and it's super healthy. And then the third one was, he says, and if they still don't believe you, go to the Nile River, take some of the water, put it on dry ground, and it'll turn into blood. So he gives them 3 signs to prove that he was going to do it. And Moses is still scared. Moses is still uncertain about doing it. And he says, please send someone with me. And it says that God gets angry. And he goes, okay, fine. Your brother Aaron the Levite is coming. He will go with you. And so Moses says yes. Moses obeyed. And so it makes me think, just like how God called Moses, God calls us too. It may not be through a burning bush, but it could be when we read the Bible, when we hear a message, maybe when we're praying. And he calls us for small things and big things. God has given you everything you need, just like he gave Moses everything he needed. And God gave him many talents and a position to lead, but Moses had to learn how to listen to God's voice and obey him rather than do things on his own strength. And so when God calls, we will obey. So that's our heart of the lesson. When God calls, we will obey. And it is okay to have questions, and God will answer our questions. But when God calls us to do something, we should obey. I hope you enjoyed this week's lesson. We have a lot of really cool things coming up in the next couple months, and we have a lot of summer events. So be sure to check it out at visitgracechurch.com/kids. We'll see you later.